Hey everyone, welcome back. You ever get that feeling like you're scrolling through your feed and it just hits you? This isn't really, this isn't what social media was supposed to be,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That feeling's pretty common these days, I think.
Yeah. We're constantly hearing about privacy issues, shadow banning, algorithms deciding what we see. It all feels a bit off. Like, shouldn't social networks actually be, social and about connecting with people?
Exactly. Like somewhere along the way, the focus shifted. And that's what we're going to unpack today.
Exactly. We're diving deep into this idea. Make social networks free great again. It's a bold statement for sure,
Mhm.
but it really gets at the heart of what a lot of us are feeling.
It does. It captures that longing for a better way to connect online. And thankfully, we have some really interesting source material for this deep dive. We've got excerpts that paint a picture of a different kind of digital future, a future built on something called decentralization.
Decentralization. Okay, so today we're going to try to answer a few big questions. First, what's so wrong with the way social media works right now? Second, what is this decentralization thing and how could it fix things? And finally, what would a decentralized social network actually mean for us, the people using it every day?
Those are the key points, for sure. And I think a good place to start is with that first question. What's broken with the current model? Because the source material we have is pretty clear. The way social networks are set up now, it often feels like we're the product, not the customer.
Yeah, that's it. It's like we're not just hanging out with friends online anymore. It feels more like we're wandering through a giant digital mall where every move is tracked and analyzed.
Right. And that's because, at the end of the day, these platforms are businesses. Their main goal is to make money. And how do they do that? Mostly through advertising. So
Mm.
they need to keep us glued to our screens, clicking and scrolling so they can show us more ads.
So every comment, every time we tag a friend in a meme, it's all feeding this machine, right?
Right. Exactly. The source material even uses the phrase, every click, share, and interaction is tracked, manipulated, and ultimately monetized. That pretty much sums it up. And it's not just about the ads themselves, it's also about how these platforms are structured. We have a few massive corporations, these tech giants, controlling almost everything.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they decide what content we see, what gets taken down, even whose voices get amplified. And it's not always clear how or why they make those decisions.
And that's where this concept of transparency, or the lack of it, comes in. Our sources are pretty concerned about that. They argue that this concentration of power in the hands of a few companies raises some serious questions about how information flows in our digital world.
Yeah, it's like the decisions about what we see, what we don't see, they impact everyone. But they're happening behind closed doors.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of algorithms. It can feel like we're constantly being nudged in certain directions by these invisible forces.
Oh yeah, the algorithms. It's like they're always trying to figure out how to keep us scrolling, even if it means showing us things that aren't really true or that just make us angry.
Right. And the source material makes a really important point here. These algorithms, they're often designed to prioritize engagement. Likes, comments, shares, stuff that keeps people glued to their screens. But that doesn't always mean they're showing us the most accurate or helpful information.
It's like that saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Exactly. And one of the big problems with this focus on engagement is that it can create these echo chambers, where you're only seeing things that confirm your existing beliefs.
Yep.
It can make it really hard to have a healthy, open discussion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You end up in these online bubbles where everyone agrees with each other, and it's almost impossible to see things from a different perspective.
And that's where things like misinformation and political polarization can really thrive. Our sources suggest that the algorithms, even if unintentionally, contribute to these problems. It's not like they're intentionally designed to divide people, but the way they work, they can end up reinforcing those divisions.
Right. And then, of course, there's the whole privacy issue. I mean, we've all had that experience where we talk about something, and then boom, an ad for it pops up on our phone.
Yeah.
It can feel like Big Brother is watching, or listening, I guess.
It is a bit unnerving, and the sources we have are pretty blunt about it. They say user privacy is continually compromised by the way these platforms collect and use our data. It's not just that they're gathering information, it's the sheer volume and detail of it. It can feel like they know everything about us.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just what we post or like. They track our browsing history, our location, who we interact with. It's a lot.
It is. And the source material even argues that this entire centralized model, the way social media is set up now, it actually undermines democratic values.
Whoa, okay. That's a pretty big claim.
Mhm.
How do they make that connection?
Well, they argue that a healthy democracy relies on people having access to a wide range of information and perspectives. They need to be able to engage in open, honest debate. And when a few powerful companies control so much of the information flow, it can create a real imbalance.
It's like those companies have a huge influence over what people see and think about the world.
Right, and that can make it harder for people to form their own opinions and participate in a meaningful way. So that's the problem. That's the dark side of social media as it exists now. But thankfully, our sources don't just leave us with a list of complaints, they offer a potential solution: decentralization.
Okay, so let's talk about this decentralization thing, because it sounds like a pretty radical idea, like turning the whole system upside down.
It is a big shift. It's about taking the power that's concentrated in the hands of these big tech companies and giving it back to the users. It's about creating a more democratic and transparent online space.
Okay, so in a decentralized social network, who's in charge? If it's not a big company,
Yeah.
then who makes the rules?
Well, that's the interesting part. In a decentralized model, it's not about one central authority. It's about distributing the power and control across the network. So you, as a user, would have much more control over your own data. You could choose how it's stored, who has access to it.
So instead of trusting a company with our data, we'd be in control of it ourselves.
Exactly. And decisions about things like content moderation, they wouldn't be made by a faceless corporation. They'd be made by the community, the users of that particular network.
That's interesting. So it's like we'd all have a say in how things work.
Right. And one of the cool things about decentralization is that it can lead to more diversity and innovation because it's not about everyone being on the same giant platform with the same rules.
So instead of having one Facebook or Twitter, we could have tons of smaller, more focused networks.
Exactly. You could have networks dedicated to specific interests, communities, even political ideologies, and each network could have its own rules and ways of doing things.
I'm starting to get the picture, but how would this actually work in practice? Like, what would these decentralized networks look like? Thankfully, our sources provide some concrete examples. They talk about this idea of Web 4 and something called SNOS. Can you explain those?
Sure. So Web 4 is kind of like the next generation of the internet. It's all about shifting away from these big centralized platforms and creating a more open, distributed ecosystem.
Okay. And how does that relate to social media?
Well, that's where SNOS comes in. SNOS stands for Social Network as a Service. And it's basically a way to build and run social networks in a decentralized way.
So instead of relying on Facebook or Twitter, people could use these SNOS platforms to create their own networks.
Exactly. And the cool thing about SNOS is that it eliminates this idea of a single point of failure. With the current model, if Facebook has a problem, the whole platform goes down. But with a decentralized network, the data and functionality are spread out. It's much more resilient.
So it's like a safety net. It's harder to censor content or take down a whole network because it's not all in one place.
Right. And that's one of the big benefits of decentralization. It makes the whole system more robust and resistant to manipulation.
This all sounds pretty amazing. But I have to ask, is this just a utopian dream? Or is it actually possible to build these kinds of decentralized social networks?
Well, it's definitely not easy, but the technology is there. And there are already projects working on this, like the one we mentioned earlier, Linkspreed. They're building a SNOS platform that aims to give users more control and privacy.
So this isn't just theory. There are people actually trying to make it happen.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about this whole idea of decentralization. It's not just about complaining about the problems with social media, it's about building something better.
So to sum it all up,
Hmm.
the current social media landscape, it's got some serious issues. Privacy concerns, algorithms that can be manipulative, and this feeling that we're not really in control of our own online experience. But decentralization offers a potential way out. It's a way to reclaim our digital space, build more meaningful connections, and maybe even create a more democratic and equitable online world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about making social networks truly social again.
And that's what this whole Make Social Networks Free Great Again idea is all about. It's a call to action for all of us to think differently about how we connect online. It's about imagining a future where technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Exactly. And that's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, go check out the links in the show notes to learn more about Linkspreed and Web 4. And start thinking about what kind of online world you want to be a part of. Because the future of social media, it's not set in stone. It's up to all of us to shape it.
It really is. And the choices we make today will determine what that future looks like.
That's a powerful thought. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time.
My pleasure. It was a great discussion.
See ya.